Chapter 544. Something's not right tonight. Wan, don't leave my side. Li Hongyuan said solemnly. Jingwan naturally listened to him. What's wrong? I don't know for now. It doesn't feel good. Intuition was a mysterious thing. However, Jingwan thought of what he had experienced. Even if she ignored this point, she still chose to believe him unconditionally. Therefore, when everyone else moved closer to the temporarily built moon worship platform, Jingwan still stood beside Li Hongyuan and didn't move. The others saw this but didn't say anything. He was the living king of hell. Now, his position in the emperor's heart had risen to another level. It was absolutely unreachable. To put it bluntly, the emperor almost worshipped him like an ancestor. Others couldn't afford to offend him. His wife was precious now. Naturally, she would listen to whatever he said. Many people thought sarcastically. Everyone had different lives. What could they do? They weren't the imperial noble consort's children. Jingwan didn't say anything. However, she saw that some people were mocking her husband in their hearts. It wasn't easy for him to have an offspring at 25 years old. Naturally, he had to be careful in everything. He used to be bold, but now he was as timid as a mouse. Jingwan lowered her eyes. To put it bluntly, if something happened to her and she had an abortion, this person probably wouldn't frown for the child. His anger would only be because she was hurt. Because of this deep affection, Jingwan was occasionally a little scared. She was worried that she couldn't give the other party the same love, even though love couldn't be measured. When she wasn't sure, she was worried about gains and losses. When she got everything, she could still have some small problems. Jingwan sometimes despised herself. Because he didn't need her to do anything, Jingwan didn't know to what extent she could do for him. However, she would love him with all her heart. However, there was actually a problem. Because she had received the best, most complete love, if one day, the person who gave her this love wanted to take it back or make it incomplete, anyone would probably go crazy. So when that time came, Jingwan reckoned that she would really kill him. On the other hand, Jingwan would never allow anyone to interfere. She would kill anyone who tried to sabotage her relationship. Jingwan suddenly turned her head to look at her husband. At this moment, she suddenly understood. What's wrong? Li Hongyuan was slightly puzzled. Jingwan shook her head. She suddenly understood why her husband was so hostile towards Chen Jingmin and Sun Yilin and wanted to kill them directly several times. It was because they had feelings for her and coveted her. Even if they were not a threat, he could not tolerate it. For example, if it were some outstanding woman who had deep feelings for her husband and could not forget him, her reaction would definitely not be any better. The most typical example was Ruan Fangfei. However, when she married her husband, Ruan Fangfei was completely out of the picture. She had not opened her heart to him yet. Her hatred for Ruan Fangfei directly stemmed from her scheming against her and the Luo family, so she did not have much feelings in this regard. As for the other people who coveted her husband, they all had a strong purpose. Basically, none of them were really targeting him. His love for her gave her a strong confidence. Perhaps she didn't realize at that time, but she actually didn't put them in her eyes at all. Because they weren't targeting him, but the worldly possessions he might bring, it didn't arouse her vigilance. If Ruan Fangfei was still here, even if she wasn't single, Jingwan would probably want to kill her. She didn't like her love rival, not because she didn't trust the other party, nor was it because the other party might cause trouble and be dangerous. It was because the other party was thinking about her own person, which she couldn't tolerate. This kind of crazy possessiveness was not because others couldn't touch what belonged to her, but because she loved it to the bone. It was only for one person, and there was no such emotion in anything else. Jingwan suddenly laughed. She seemed to have understood something and was happy for some reason. According to her husband's identity and status, she would definitely have love rivals in the future. Jingwan believed that at that time, without her husband's coercion, she would take the initiative to deal with it and strangle everything in the cradle. Even if she didn't kill them, she would let them know clearly that if they dared to come, they had to be prepared to die. So what if it would ruin her reputation? Compared to her husband, her reputation was not worth mentioning at all. Are you stupid today? Li Hongyuan reached out and pinched her face. Even if I'm stupid, you still have to treasure me for the rest of your life. Jingwan said without holding back. Li Hongyuan chuckled. He didn't know what his wife had thought through, but he felt that it was a bit different. Because he, Li Hongyuan, was never someone who only gave without asking for anything in return. The stronger his love, the more his wife cared about him. He was still waiting, but he didn't know that this thought had actually come true at this moment. However, if Jingwan didn't say it, he would probably only find out the next time Jingwan made a move. After the moon worship, Lu Qingdi also arrived late. Afterwards, the Empress presided over the distribution of the mooncakes. However, her body wasn't good, so she had to be supported the entire process. It was a kind of sadness. Thinking about the past, her schemes, her ambitions, without a healthy body, everything became empty talk. Qin Shufei was the one who cut the mooncakes. The mooncakes prepared were big enough and there were a lot of them. However, the emperor's family was not to be trifled with. Therefore, in the end, only a small piece was distributed, and it was gone in 2 or 3 bites. Jingwan felt that the mooncakes tasted good. The banquets in the palace weren't very good, but it didn't mean that the imperial chef's skills were bad. To a certain extent, because there were too many rules and the imperial kitchen was relatively far away, many things no longer tasted the same when they reached the mouth. The imperial chef couldn't do anything about it, but things like mooncakes were different. Therefore, the pastry chef was the one who received the most rewards in the imperial kitchen. Lu Qingdi seemed to be in a good mood today and didn't stick to the rules. He didn't have to sit at his own table. Even the concubines didn't mind sitting at their children's table. For many people, this was a great favor, especially the concubines of the lower ranks. They could only show their faces at the emperor's family banquets. If it was a formal occasion, they wouldn't even have the chance to sit. The only chance they had to sit at the same table with their children was in their own palace, and the children came first. If Lu Qingdi was here, they could only be the person who served the dishes. Jingwan and Li Hongyuan's table was still only the 2 of them. Their mother wasn't at the table, and the children were in their bellies. It wasn't very lively, but they enjoyed it very much. Jingwan raised her head to look at the sky. There were thin layers of clouds tonight, but at this moment, it didn't cover the light of the full moon hanging in the sky. The surrounding stars were scattered, big and small pearls fell on a jade plate. Tonight is also a good night to admire the moon. Jingwan said softly. Li Hongyuan glanced at it and made a sound in response. He didn't care whether the moon was beautiful or not. He was just echoing his wife's words. At this time, the chief steward next to Lu Qingdi walked over. Wang Yi, Wang Fei, His Majesty wants you two to move to the imperial table. His voice was neither soft nor loud, and his attitude was very respectful. Because of Su Guifei's big secret, Li Hongyuan's attitude towards Lu Qingdi was still not very good. Even though he had been rebellious since he was young and always opposed Lu Qingdi. Not going. The chief steward's face stiffened, and he cursed Li Hongyuan in his heart. Jingwan smiled, it's the same sitting there. Wang Yi should accompany Fu Huang to drink a cup of wine. The chief steward only wanted to kneel and kowtow to Jingwan. Jin Qian Wang Fei was really too understanding. Li Hongyuan glanced at her and slowly stood up. It seemed that he had compromised. This husband and wife pair, one playing the good cop, the other playing the bad cop. This double act, was very tacit. Li Hongyuan gave a perfunctory bow, and Luqingdi's old face was smiling like a flower. With the lesson from the Dragon Boat Festival, Luqingdi was much more amiable to Jingwan this time. Of course, Jingwan was pregnant and the Imperial Gui Fei had given her a protective talisman. Li Hongyuan didn't speak, so Jingwan chatted with Luqingdi with a smile. Perhaps she was really in a good mood. Jingwan didn't say anything funny, and Luqingdi could also laugh loudly, causing other people to look askance. In their view, the so-called reward was just finding a reason to call Li Hongyuan to the imperial table. It looked like the three of them were a family, and everyone else was superfluous. Their original good mood naturally faded. Especially Su Guifei. She clearly had children and grandchildren, but she was like those concubines who didn't have children, all alone. She lowered her head and seemed to be drinking in depression, but in reality, it was just to cover up the hatred in her eyes that was almost tangible. She had done so much, but in the end, Li Hongyuan, this bastard, was so lucky that his wife got pregnant. And her most outstanding son, the heavens gave him luck, but didn't give him everything. He gave birth to a little girl, and because of this, he was demoted to a commoner. She had spent so much effort, and her hands were stained with so much blood, but in the end, she had fallen to this state. How could she not hate or resent? Therefore, the mask that she had worn for decades, the mask that was almost a part of her face, was finally completely torn off. Now, she didn't dare to look at people directly. Because with just one look, she could reveal her true feelings. However, with Li Hongyuan's keenness, he was more or less aware of Su Guifei's emotions. He didn't care and didn't even give her a glance. It had to be said that when Luqing Emperor cleaned up the people in the Jade Essence Palace, there were some things that other people didn't know. However, there were no walls in the world that didn't let the wind pass through. Some things could still be traced. For example, everyone present was well aware that Su Guifei and her adopted son had completely shed all pretense of cordiality because of some things. Jin Qinhuang was fine, and other than the title of Guifei, Su Guifei had nothing left. It was obvious that Su Guifei was in the wrong. Speaking of which, during this period of time, the concubines didn't go to the Jade Essence Palace less. To add insult to injury, that was definitely the best show for the women in the imperial harem. It was meaningless to step on those who had no status and no status. That kind of person wasn't worth it at all. Only by stepping on those who were high above and had bullied them before would they feel happy. Su Guifei used to be the most favored in the imperial harem for so many years. It was unknown how many concubines had fallen in her hands. Perhaps because she stood high enough, some of the things she had done before were like eating and drinking, she didn't have any impression of it. For others, a gay friend could be a disaster. Thus, if there was a chance, how could they not take revenge? In a banquet held in the imperial harem, regardless of the nature, singing and dancing were indispensable themes. While chatting with others, he slowly ate his food. From time to time, he would glance at the graceful dance moves of the dancers. Occasionally, he would tilt his head to listen to the melodious music of the singers. Otherwise, the melodious music was just as pleasant to listen to. Although she had watched it many times, there was always something different. In order to avoid being too bored or being nagged by Luqingdi, Jingwan watched it very attentively. When she took it seriously, she felt that it was indeed not bad. Luqingdi's royal table was definitely more sumptuous than other people's tables at any time. 30 to 40 dishes were relatively few. Today was the Mid-Autumn Festival. Looking at the wave of dishes being served, Jingwan estimated that there would be more than 100 dishes. In the end, the total number of dishes that could enter Luqingdi's stomach was 3. That was the extraordinary performance of the imperial kitchen. The rest was all wasted. Many emperors said that the treasury was empty during their reigns. According to such a wasteful way, it would be strange if it wasn't empty. Not to mention that if the emperor changed every meal to 8 dishes and 2 soups, and added snacks or something, the number of people in the imperial harem would decrease gradually. Then, the entire imperial harem would save a lot of money every year. Was it wrong for the emperor to have 11 dishes a meal? Don't joke. 7 or 8 people were enough. Unfortunately, the food was also an important symbol of the emperor's identity. Li Hongyuan directly picked up a finger-sized meatball and put it into Jingwan's mouth. Jingwan opened her mouth and ate it. She was too used to it. Looking at it, she knew that it was definitely not the first time. When Jingwan reached out to drink some soup, she realized that there was something wrong with the way people looked at her, especially Luqingdi, who was looking at her meaningfully. When she just swallowed the food in her mouth, Jingwan felt a little blocked. She reached out and pinched someone. She forgot about it. Did he also go astray? He obviously did it on purpose. Li Hongyuan's body was basically full of muscles. It was not easy to pinch him. When Jingwan pinched him, it was more like scratching an itch for him. He glanced at her indifferently and added a piece of fish into her bowl. Jingwan's face was indeed much thicker now. However, being stared at by so many people, she still felt a little embarrassed. However, someone was completely unaware of it. He was very happy. If she really stopped him, he would probably attract more attention. Jingwan was quite helpless. She could see that this person was obviously narrow-minded. He was trying to settle accounts. He couldn't do anything to her, so he used this method to draw hatred for her. The world was used to it. It was called public display of affection. The world was reserved and reserved. It was not proper for a husband and wife to hold hands in front of outsiders. It was unconventional, shameless, and even shameless. Moreover, it was always the wife who served the husband. On the other hand, if it was more serious, some people would even ask where the 3 obedience and 4 virtues had gone. Of course, in the eyes of other men, it was indeed improper. However, in the eyes of other women, it was not the case. The accumulated hatred came from them. TSK. Jingwan lowered her eyes slightly and pretended to be dead. Li Hongyuan put down his chopsticks and drank a cup of wine. His eyes met Luqingdi's. Imperial father, why are you looking at me? Luqingdi coughed lightly. It was not easy to point it out directly. It's better not to do things that shouldn't be done. Li Hongyuan sneered. Others might want to be reserved. Who was Li Hongyuan? He was the living king of hell, the former devil incarnate. If he couldn't do it, he would do it. Compared to being reserved, he preferred to be direct and violent. I heard that Imperial Father loves Imperial Mother and is devoted to Imperial Mother. I don't believe that you haven't fed Imperial Mother before. His gaze turned and fell on the others. Don't make a fuss over such a trivial matter. When you have nothing to do, you just watch beauties dance. If you're not satisfied, you can change to something else. Staring at us husband and wife, you really have nothing better to do. If you can't stand it, you can do it yourself. This prince doesn't mind at all. Li Hongyuan's peerlessly thick-skinned face didn't blush and his heart didn't skip a beat. However, it made the others who hadn't done anything flustered. Especially Luqingdi, who almost choked. He blew his beard and glared at Li Hongyuan. Do you think everyone is like you, evil creature? If you want to be close to your wife, scram back to your own mansion. Close the door and do whatever you want. When you're outside, you have to pay attention to it. Li Hongyuan bluntly mocked, Imperial Father doesn't have anyone to accompany you, and you don't allow other couples to be close. It's so unreasonable. Moreover, you don't have anyone to accompany you now. Who caused this? If you don't like me, you can just issue an imperial edict and confine me to the mansion. Do you really think I want to come to the palace? Last year, in the manor, there wasn't a bunch of messy people. You don't know how happy I was. Li Hongyuan spat out knives again. Lu Qingdi was so angry that his liver hurt. His heart choked and he almost vomited blood. The others were also collectively implicated. They were indiscriminately attacked by Li Hongyuan. They were really innocent. Lu Qingdi trembled and pointed at Li Hongyuan. You evil creature. Will you only be satisfied after I die from anger? Ah. You did it and you don't allow others to talk about it. You're not happy just by looking at her. Li Hongyuan stood up. You're still unhappy. What does your majesty want to do? The atmosphere instantly became hostile. Jingwan was actually fine, but some people's tolerance was not so good. Especially those who were smiling, they were scared to tears. Li Hongyuan seemed to think that he didn't provoke Lu Qingdi enough. I dare to take responsibility for what I do. I'm open and above board. What about you, your majesty? There could have been one more person at this table. With a bang, Lu Qingdi slammed the table, bristling with anger. He looked at Li Hongyuan like an angry lion, but Li Hongyuan was not to be outdone. The father and son looked at each other like enemies. In the end, it was Lu Qingdi who was defeated and deflated. Alright, there are some things that I don't want to say to you. Today is the Mid-Autumn Festival. Accompany Fu Huang to have a meal. Don't quarrel with me every time. I'm the emperor, your father. You should leave me some face. Li Hongyuan still wanted to say something, but Jingwan reached out and pulled him. When he looked over, Jingwan gently shook her head. Li Hongyuan looked at him for a moment and didn't speak again. Lu Qingdi saw this and felt sour in his heart. It was said that when you have a wife, you forget your parents. This evil creature was really the typical example. However, he didn't know if it was because he personally took this evil creature out of his mother's womb, but he was born to be at odds with him. When he talked to him, he couldn't get along well with him. Sit down. Lu Qingdi waved his hand. Even if it was for this meal, he didn't want to talk to him anymore. He could do whatever he wanted. He would turn a blind eye and pretend that he didn't see anything. If he talked to him, he didn't know what would happen. Lu Qingdi sometimes wondered what sins he had committed in his previous life to give birth to such an evil creature to go against him, but he was reluctant to punish him. However, Li Hongyuan vaguely mentioned the imperial noble consort's death, so Emperor Lu Qing lost his interest. Li Hongyuan didn't seem to want to compromise, but Jingwan pulled him to sit down. Jingwan's face was a little cautious and a little fearful, but her heart was very calm. She was just wondering what was wrong with this master today, to the extent that he had dragged so many people to be unhappy with him. Obviously, only Jingwan knew that someone had done it on purpose. Therefore, anyone who met him would have to light a candle for him. This episode seemed to have passed just like that. In everyone's hearts, it did not leave too deep of a mark. After all, it was just like how jealousy cursed Jingwan, they were used to it. The first time, the second time, the second time, the second time, the third time, the third time, the third time, they would be numb to it. After the seventh, eighth, and ninth time, they would probably be as indifferent as water. Of course, this was the majority of people. Noble consort Su had a hunched back and a pair of gloomy eyes. When mentioning the imperial noble consort, her eyes were filled with resentment, joy, and fear. She was most worried that this fire would burn her. No matter if it was her or her son, they couldn't endure being disliked by the emperor again. Otherwise, there really wouldn't be any room for a comeback. Perhaps it was because Lu Qingdi had suffered another blow and his spirit had become a little weak. Perhaps he didn't even think about noble consort Su anymore. Chapter 545. Jingwan tilted her head and whispered something in Li Hongyuan's ear. Li Hongyuan put down his wine glass. I think I'll go with you. Jingwan carefully glanced at Luqingdi. On the surface, she seemed to be asking for Luqingdi's consent, but in fact, she was a little bit mischievous. She wanted to see Luqingdi change his face. Luqingdi decided to ignore it to the end. Jingwan felt a little regretful. When his subject met the emperor, to prevent himself from being disrespectful, he even drank less water. It was really sad. Jingwan changed her clothes and came out. Her hands were still a little damp after being stained with water. Li Hongyuan stood in the corridor with his hands behind his back. He looked up at the bright moon in the night sky. It was quiet. The flowers and trees outside the corridor formed a beautiful picture. It was beautiful, but it also had a feeling that it could be seen from afar. But when he turned back, he naturally showed a faint smile. The sense of distance suddenly disappeared. Li Hongyuan stretched out his hand to Jingwan. Jingwan put her hand in his palm. Under the moonlight, their foreheads touched, and the tips of their noses touched. It felt so good. Ah, Yuan, I don't want to go back. Then I won't go back. Otherwise, I'll go directly out of the palace to the prince's mansion, or go to the lantern market to enjoy the lanterns. If I'm lucky, I might meet the Luo family. Anyway, Li Hongyuan was very clear that as long as he didn't touch the throne, his good father's tolerance for him was so high that it was strange. If he didn't make good use of it, he would feel sorry for himself. I don't think so. Although you have already swept his face clean, you should take it easy. How to put it, someone was so high profile and showed his presence everywhere, but in fact, trying to cover up makes it more conspicuous. It was just that not many people knew. How many people were so good at secretly usurping the throne since ancient times? However, how many people had the luck to start over? Thinking about it this way, the acceptance seemed to be higher. What does it matter? Nothing. Li Hongyuan's voice stopped abruptly. He looked at the place where the banquet was set up in the imperial garden and narrowed his eyes slightly. His intuition was right. However, they actually played this trick. Li Hongyuan sneered. What's wrong? Jingwan was puzzled and looked in the same direction. Something's wrong. Judging from the commotion, there should be an assassin at the banquet, Li Hongyuan said calmly. Jingwan's eyes widened slightly. Suddenly, she grasped Li Hongyuan's hand tightly. Something happened when we were leaving the banquet. Will they frame us for this? Things that had been planned out could not be called a coincidence. I'm fine. Li Hongyuan wasn't sure how many assassins there were and he only brought 2 guards with him. Jingwan's current situation was special. If anything were to happen to her, she would be in trouble. Therefore, Li Hongyuan didn't plan to go over. Jingwan obviously saw through his thoughts. Ah, Yuan, being late and not being there are 2 different things. I know, but all those people added together can't compare to one of your fingers. I'm very happy to be so loved by you, but if that's the case, I'm afraid we'll be in trouble later. Assassins are not guards. No matter how many there are, they can't be much. At the critical moment, Jingwan's IQ was absolutely online. Li Hongyuan frowned. Then you must follow me closely. Don't worry. Li Hongyuan pulled Jingwan, followed by Gong Mama, Hei Mei, and 2 guards. As they got closer, Jingwan also heard the noise. The noise was getting more and more obvious. 2 people suddenly rushed out from the side and happened to bump into Jingwan and the others. The 2 people were stunned at first, probably because they didn't expect to encounter such a situation. Then, with a fierce look, they put their hands in front of their chests. The daggers, which were blue under the light, were obviously smeared with poison and were stained with blood. They rushed quickly toward Jingwan and the others. It was not the first time Jingwan had encountered such a situation. She didn't panic, but the hand holding Li Hongyuan slightly tightened. Li Hongyuan's thumb gently rubbed the back of her hand to comfort her. Gong Mama and Hei Mei didn't move, but the two guards went up to them without fear. As a prince, although he could bring two guards into the palace, he was still not allowed to bring weapons. Bare-handed against two assassins with poison daggers, he didn't know how poisonous the daggers were. If it was a slow poison, then it was okay. But if it was the kind of poison that killed at the sight of blood, a small wound could cause him to lose his life. Li Hongyuan's two guards were shadow guards. They were better at dealing with this kind of crafty assassination method than traditional martial arts. Although Jingwan didn't understand much, she also found that the two people from the prince's fu had the upper hand. But because of the other party's poison daggers, they couldn't let go. Otherwise, they might have already taken them down. The clothes of these two people were too obvious. With just a glance, it could be distinguished. One was a dancer, the other was a palace eunuch from the imperial kitchen. They clearly belonged to the kind of people who looked weak, but at this moment, their moves were unusually fierce. Although the two guards of Jin Qin Wang Fu didn't see blood, but the places where their clothes were cut were not few. In the blink of an eye, they had already fought more than 10 rounds. Soon, Yu Zhongqing chased after them with several imperial guards. When he saw the current situation, he joined in without hesitation. They had swords with them, and they had an absolute advantage in numbers. It was only a matter of time before they could take them down. As Jingwan watched attentively, Li Hongyuan suddenly let go of her hand, grabbed her waist and retreated. Seeing the shining swords chopping towards Jingwan and the others, it turned out that there were also assassins among the imperial guards. When both sides were like fire and water, one of them suddenly turned towards Jingwan and the others. However, the assassin might have thought that they were distracted, but Li Hongyuan never relaxed his vigilance from beginning to end. At this time, he only believed in himself, and even divided his attention to his back. In the process of Li Hongyuan bringing Jingwan and retreating, after all, there were two people and their movements were hindered. The other party's blade was getting closer and closer. Suddenly, he brought Jingwan to the side, causing the assassin's blade to cut empty air. Then Li Hongyuan kicked the other party's wrist. The blade clearly changed direction, but it didn't fall off. Looking closely, it turned out that the assassin had wrapped the hilt of the blade around his hand. However, Li Hongyuan's kick was enough to break the other party's bones. With severe pain, how could he continue to use the blade? So much so that Li Hongyuan didn't make another move. The assassin only thought that he was being looked down upon. Seizing the opportunity, his other hand reached into his bosom. However, before he could take out the dagger, his eyes suddenly widened in disbelief. Then he met with a pair of cold and emotionless eyes, and the owner of those eyes was actually a middle-aged woman. With unwillingness, the assassin's body softened and fell to the ground. Although it happened quickly, Jingwan also saw clearly that the assassin only paid attention to them, and her husband didn't make another move. Unexpectedly, Nanny Gong suddenly rushed out from behind. It was the first time that Jingwan saw Nanny Gong move so fast. Nanny Gong held the hairpin in her left hand, and her right hand went straight into the assassin's bosom. When the hairpin pierced into the assassin's neck, Nanny Gong changed the direction of the dagger and directly pierced into his body. Nanny Gong stepped back, but didn't pull out the hairpin. It wasn't the first time that she had seen such a scene. For Jingwan, it was still a little exciting. However, Jingwan's eyes didn't move away. Looking at the man who was gradually dying on the ground, a pool of blood quickly appeared under him, and the blood from his neck kept flowing out through the hairpin. Obviously, it was caused by the two main arteries being injured in both places. However, wasn't the hairpin's lethality a little too strong? Jingwan suddenly thought of a possibility. What if the hairpin was shaped like a triangular thorn? Jingwan moved her eyes to the place where the hairpin was connected to the assassin's neck. Because of her good eyesight, she could see clearly in the dim light. Sure enough. Commander, a cry of surprise attracted Jingwan's attention. Yu Zhongqing's body fell forward, and his back took a solid hit. However, his reaction was fast enough. He quickly turned around and blocked the second hit. Yu Zhongqing's eyes were cold. Even if the opponent was his brother, he showed no mercy at this moment. Jingwan clenched her fists tightly. It was obvious that there was more than one person in the Imperial Army who was problematic. However, under the circumstances just now, everyone thought that there was only one. The second person suddenly made a move and even attacked them from behind. It was impossible to guard against. Perhaps he knew that it was impossible to succeed in attacking Li Hongyuan and Jingwan, so he chose Yu Zhongqing. The dancer and little eunuch from before were like arrows at the end of their flight. They were quickly taken down. Several Imperial guards turned around to help Yu Zhongqing. Perhaps it was because of anger, the eunuch was directly killed. When everything was over, they all stood there in a daze. However, the good brothers who used to hang around each other's shoulders when they had nothing to do were now unconsciously on guard against each other. They were even at a loss of what to do. Obviously, because of what happened just now, they had become a little paranoid. You are the Imperial Guards carefully selected by the Emperor. You are responsible for the safety of the palace. Look at you now, what are you doing? You were in a hurry before, so you were taken advantage of. Now, can't you tell that the people around you are not your own brothers? Yu Zhongqing did not speak harshly. His voice was still calm. It was also because of this calmness that the Imperial Guards regained their senses and quickly recovered. At this moment, Yu Zhongqing was not very good. He was a little dazed and his body seemed to be a little stiff. He did not feel pain from the wound on his back. Instead, he felt numbness. However, he felt a chill down below. It was also a little sticky. It was obvious that he was still bleeding. If you don't want to die, quickly go to the Imperial doctor. Li Hongyuan said coldly. The others only then realized that Yu Zhongqing was injured. They all became anxious, so they took care of Yu Zhongqing again. The assassins on the ground were thrown to the side. Obviously, they looked like they had recovered, but their hearts were still a little weak. That was why they appeared to be a little out of it. Li Hongyuan looked on coldly from the sidelines. Therefore, from his point of view, although these Imperial Guards looked pretty good, they were still stable in the palace. These people were still lacking in many things. Their psychological quality was not up to standard. Yu Zhongqing naturally understood this as well. However, he was a little powerless right now. Don't worry about me, go take a look, okay, leave 2 people here. I will help you deal with it. You should take care of your own life. Thank you, Your Highness. Yu Zhongqing also knew that now was not the time to be brave. If he completely failed this time, he would probably die with grievances. He had not taken his revenge. Li Hongyuan did not care about the 2 helpless Imperial Guards. He let the guard check the situation of the assassins. Guard Qian squatted down and stretched out his hand to check one by one. Master, they are all dead. These 2 committed suicide by taking poison. Li Hongyuan's gaze fell on the dancer and the little eunuch. Yes. However, they did not put the poison in their mouths. They took the poison in advance. Li Hongyuan pulled Jingwan away. Clean it up. When they arrived at the place where the banquet was held, the entire place was already in a mess. There were also cries that sounded as if the sky was falling and the earth was collapsing. This was because several young princes and imperial grandsons had died, and countless were injured. The number of people lying on the ground was far more than expected. Although it was impossible to tell who was the assassin and who was the victim based on their clothes, it was still possible to tell from their hands. Moreover, these people basically all had weapons in their hands. Li Hongyuan roughly scanned the area. The number of assassins was more than expected. Adding all of them together, it was already in the double digits. According to the 4 assassins they encountered, there should not be any survivors. However, even so, it was enough to show that there was a loophole in the palace's defense. Regardless of whether the main responsibility this time was Zhongqing's, if he did not die this time, he would lose a layer of skin after this. However, at this time, he should be in charge of the overall situation. Where was the person who was fearless and showing the power of heaven? The smell of blood was a little heavy. With the death of those children, Jingwan was clearly seriously affected. She covered her mouth with a handkerchief and wanted to vomit. After all, pregnant people were especially sensitive to smell. Moreover, there was also a psychological stimulation. There were already people at the scene who took the initiative to take care of the follow-up matters. Even if there was no one, Li Hongyuan would only care about his wife at this moment. He took Jingwan and left without a trace of politeness. However, he did not leave the palace. Instead, he took Jingwan to Qin Shu Fei's Sweet Dew Palace. This choice did not seem to be a problem. Originally, he thought that after such a thing happened, everyone would be in a panic. Most people's first reaction would be to gather together and not be separated. Therefore, Qin Shufei should not be in Sweet Dew Palace. The reality was a little unexpected. Qin Shufei looked to be in good spirits. She should not have been frightened. After learning of Jingwan's situation, she immediately asked someone to bring her some sour plums. Did Sweet Dew Palace just happen to have something like sour plums? Clearly, it was specially prepared for Jingwan. Although he did not know when Jingwan would enter the palace, she might not come to Sweet Dew Palace after entering the palace. However, this was Qin Shufei and Huang Guifei's kind intentions. According to the special relationship between Qin Shufei and Huang Guifei, it could be said that Qin Shufei treated Li Hongyuan as a son. If it was really like this, there was nothing wrong with it. Under normal circumstances, Qin Wang was a man of few words. Therefore, he should not be expected to say anything at this time. He quietly embraced Jingwan and gently stroked her back. Seeing that Qin Shufei did not have any change in expression, Jingwan did not push Li Hongyuan away. She suppressed the nausea and tried not to think about those stimulating scenes as much as possible. She began to ask about the assassins. Today's matter was really too serious. This assassination was obviously carefully arranged. There was a plan, a clear goal, and the method was also sinister. Taking poison in advance, regardless of whether the mission was completed or whether they could escape unscathed, they would undoubtedly die. Without any survivors, there were many things that could not be investigated. This also meant that anything could happen. Realizing the seriousness of the matter, the scene that stimulated Jingwan was also thrown to the side. The eunuch serving the dishes, dancers, musicians, and assassins seemed to have appeared from all directions. Their main targets seemed to be the emperor, but their targets were also the princes. By the time the imperial guards arrived, the situation was already chaotic and the tragedy had already been caused. Qin Shufei's face was a little pale and she still had lingering fears. Upon closer inspection, her clothes were still a little dirty. She didn't have the time to change, or perhaps she didn't have the strength to change. Thus, the impact on Qin Shufei was more serious than it looked. Jingwan did not urge and waited for Qin Shufei to calm down. Su Guifei blocked a fatal blow for the emperor. If it was not good, I'm afraid that her life would be in danger. The situation was not yet under control and the emperor hurriedly carried Su Shi to the Jade Essence Palace. The amount of information was huge. Jingwan and Li Hongyuan looked at each other, seeming to have smelled something. Later, it was the Gong Prince who stood up to stabilize the situation, then it was Kong Prince, and then the other princes also competed to show off. Qin Shufei had always been a calm and peaceful person, but at this time, she showed a slightly mocking expression. She clearly saw that those princes, when the assassins rushed towards them, more than once they grabbed the people around them to block, rolling and crawling, where was the slightest bit of their usual manners. It should be known that all the princes had martial arts masters. When they fought on the martial arts field, they looked like they were skilled, but when it came to the end, none of them stood up to protect their wives and children. Qin Shufei restrained the expression on her face. The imperial concubines were all forced by them to return to their respective palaces. You need to pay attention. At that time, the emperor's descendants and the imperial concubines should have been present, but you were the only ones absent. No matter what, those people will put this matter on you, so you must think of a way to deal with it. Whether it was anger or shifting the blame, what Qin Shufei said was inevitable. If it really was Ben Wang's plan, how could they still be alive? Li Hongyuan said quite conceitedly. Qin Shufei believed his words, but the problem was, he couldn't say that to outsiders. If he said it, it would be the same as exposing himself. Jingwan patted him, be serious. Li Hongyuan looked at Jingwan, then looked at Qin Shufei, I know. Hearing that, this pair of a mother-in-law and daughter-in-law both breathed a sigh of relief, choosing to believe 100%. Afterwards, after drinking a few mouthfuls of tea, Luqing Emperor's personal steward hurried over. Nubi greets Xu Fei Nyang Nyang, Wang Ye, Wang Fei Nyang Nyang. In this kind of situation, coming to find Jin Qin Wang was definitely a difficult task. Dispense with the formalities. Why are you coming to Sweet Du Palace now? How is Gui Fei Nyang Nyang? Qin Shufei asked. Answering Nyang Nyang, Gui Fei Nyang Nyang's life is in danger. The emperor ordered Nubi to come see Wang Ye. The head eunuch carefully looked at Li Hongyuan. The emperor asked Wang Ye to call Jin Qin Wang Fu's doctor to immediately enter the palace. Looking at Li Hongyuan, he didn't have the slightest reaction, as if Jin Qin Wang wasn't him. Jingwan glanced at him. It was fine to just casually pretend, but if he was implicated, wouldn't he be tired? I know, bodyguard Qian is outside, let him make a trip. Gong can return to Fu Wang's side to wait, in case there is a need, he can lend a hand. Jingwan directly made the decision. Yes. The head eunuch's heart was practically filled with tears. Jin Qin Wang Fei was really a good person. After they left, Qin Shufei jokingly said, there are several high-ranking women in the inner palace, now only Wei Xianfei hasn't been treated by your Fu's doctor. This person is also being raised in Jin Qin Wang Fu. If it was another place, she would definitely have been sent to the imperial hospital by the emperor. Wei Xianfei may not have any serious problems, even if there is, she probably won't have that life. Jingwan had a slight smile, but her words were particularly cold and ruthless. This caused Li Hongyuan to be somewhat surprised. Qin Shufei stared blankly, but then, no matter why she said this, they didn't feel that it was inappropriate. I'm guessing that it won't just be the doctors in your residence. Prince Rui's family will also be entering the palace soon. Who knows, Su Shi might even want to see you. Qin Shufei said faintly. Obviously, if Gui Fei Su didn't grasp such a good opportunity, then she would have lived in vain. Grass would have long grown on her grave, and her bones would have turned to soil. So what if they turned over? If they can step on them once, twice, then they can step on them 3 or 4 times. Li Hongyuan really didn't care much about this matter. What he cared about was that relying on Prince Rui's people, they wouldn't be able to do what they did tonight. Chapter 546. So, who was the mastermind behind tonight's show? Just as she was thinking about this question, Jingwan also asked. Does Yuan have any suspects? There is. If the guess is true, then things may be very interesting. Interesting. A lot of people died, what was there to be interesting about? Or was it that the interesting in someone's mouth was different from the understanding of ordinary people? Compared to his usual behavior, it seemed that the latter was more likely. Jingwan felt that she should prepare to light a candle for someone. Let's not mention this matter for the time being. If Imperial concubine Su makes a comeback, she definitely won't be content with her lot. I don't know what will happen. After being targeted by Imperial concubine Su many times, even though she didn't succeed every time and she herself was unharmed, Jingwan still felt quite annoyed. That was a mask that had been worn for a long time and suppressed for a long time. Once it broke out, it became distorted and perverted. The bargaining chips in Su Shi's hands are basically gone. In the end, she is just trapped in the harem and can't make any waves. Li Hongming went down once, and at least half of the people who were optimistic about him left. At this time, even if those people turned back, Li Hongming would disregard former enmity and be willing to accept them again. However, there is a phrase called settling accounts at an opportune time. Those people are not stupid, how could they not think of this point? So even if they feel that they miscalculated and walked the wrong way, they will still grit their teeth and continue walking. Moreover, they will do everything possible to help their new master and completely kill Li Hongming. No one will like a traitor. We don't have to do anything. After a period of time, Li Hongming will still be in a terrible fix. So to say, this mother and son pair, even if they climbed up again, in fact, they were far from the original threat. The head eunuch by Lu Qingdi's side returned not long after. This time, when he faced Li Hongyuan, he seemed even more apprehensive. He stammered and couldn't express himself clearly for a long time. After all, at that time, Jin Qin Wang and Gue Fei Nyang had completely broken off their relationship. Therefore, now that Gue Fei Nyang wanted to see Jin Qin Wang, if by any chance she angered Jin Qin Wang, the person who passed on the message would be angered and killed on the spot by Jin Qin Wang. Therefore, he really didn't dare to say it. Why did such a chore always fall on his head? Clearly, there were other people by the emperor's side. Sitting in the manager's position and being deeply trusted, shouldn't he be enjoying limitless glory? He was probably the most miserable chief steward in history. It was said that accompanying a monarch was like accompanying a tiger. This master was not a monarch, but he was even more terrifying than one. At this moment, the head eunuch inexplicably admired the colleague who had always been by Jin Qinwang's side. That was a truly capable person. After so many years, he could still live well. He was clearly the emperor's personal manager, but when facing him, he couldn't hold it up. Therefore, shouldn't he not care about these things and instead learn from him? Li Hongyuan tried his best to restrain his temper. However, the path he had chosen made him even more arrogant and reckless. Therefore, he had to endure when it came to important matters. Apart from that, he gave all his patience and good temper to Jingwan. Because Lu Qingdi's chief steward had made him wait for a long time, the teacup had already landed accurately on his head. He screamed, but that sound was swallowed back in a very short time. The hand that subconsciously covered his forehead also quickly moved away. Above his eyes, there was a bloody handprint. Blood was still flowing out, quickly blurring his vision. His body couldn't stop trembling slightly, because of pain and also because of fear. At this time, he didn't dare to hesitate anymore. Like pouring beans, he explained the matter clearly without panting. Li Hongyuan was expressionless. What does Su Shi think Ben Wang is, a kitten or puppy that she can call to come and go as she pleases? Ben Wang and her have already been written off. You bring these words back for Ben Wang. If anyone dares to come again for this matter, I will definitely make sure that they won't be able to return. Li Hongyuan fiercely slammed the small square table at his hand. The square table directly split into pieces. In the end, the head eunuch only had one eye covered. Seeing this, he rejoiced. His legs trembled even more. If this palm hit his body, he reckoned that his little life would be gone. Yes, Nubi will withdraw. Compared to a living king of hell, he was even more willing to face the emperor's anger. In the Jade Essence Palace, which was originally bleak, now seemed to have recovered its former liveliness. However, imperial concubine Su was lying on the bed, her breath hanging by a thread. That knife had directly pierced into her heart, and because of the poison, the blood couldn't be stopped. She used a white cloth to tightly press it down, staining it red one after another. The head eunuch came back to report. Imperial concubine Su might have heard a sound, so she tried her best to open her eyes. Her consciousness was a little blurry. After looking for a while, she couldn't find the figure she was looking for. The tears in the corners of her eyes suddenly rolled down. Your Majesty, is he really not willing to see me again, even if it's the last time? No, Yuan is a good child, a filial child. Zhen will send someone else. Imperial concubine Su smiled bitterly. Yes, Yuan is a good child. It's me who has let him down. It's all my fault. It seemed that speaking was consuming her vitality, so Imperial concubine Su's face became more and more pale. But I'm just jealous. I clearly love your Majesty so much, your Majesty, but your Majesty only has my sister in his heart. I want to treat Yuan wholeheartedly, but he looks more and more like my sister. This concubine's heart is like being eaten by thousands of ants and insects, like being fried by a raging fire. It's like this every day and night. I keep telling myself that Yuan is innocent, he's the only one my sister left for your Majesty, so I can't. Imperial concubine Su opened her heart. At this moment, she no longer concealed her ugly heart. However, all men had bad natures. No matter how ugly a woman's heart was, if everything was based on her true feelings for him, then their vanity would be greatly satisfied. In this way, it seemed that no matter how big a mistake this woman had made, she could be forgiven. Luqingdi was almost in such a state now. He had completely forgotten about the imperial concubine. What's more, as the saying goes, a dying man speaks the truth. Imperial concubine Su still took the knife for him. Luqingdi couldn't help but tremble at the thought of this injury on his body. Looking at this injury, she must have risked her life. Therefore, at this moment, whatever Imperial concubine Su said was the truth. He only needed to nod and say, okay. However, Imperial concubine Su was obviously a smart person. She wouldn't ask for anything at this time. Even if she really couldn't escape this disaster, she would never ask for anything. What she asked for would erase the kindness. What she wanted was for Luqingdi to give it to her willingly. What she asked for might only be one or two things, but what the emperor gave on his own initiative might be unlimited. In order to turn things around, Imperial concubine Su really gambled with her life. Rather than being humiliated and waiting to die in the Jade Essence Palace, it was better to die while being remembered by the emperor. Just like that bitch Pei Shi, Imperial concubine Su was certain that if she was still alive, the emperor would not have treasured her as much as he did in the beginning. If she had been used properly, perhaps her relationship with the emperor would have dropped to the freezing point long ago. However, she died at that moment and left the deepest mark in the emperor's heart. So much so that the emperor still could not forget her even after dozens of years and endlessly doted on the bitch she left behind. It was a pity that Imperial concubine Su realized this a little late. Otherwise, she wouldn't have schemed so ruthlessly in the morning. At least, she wouldn't have let that bastard die. Now, she grasped this point and gambled with her life. It would be best if he could survive, but if he couldn't, her son shouldn't have any problems in the future. After going through all the previous things, she believed that her son's temperament would become more mature and cautious. He wouldn't make mistakes easily and wouldn't be caught by others. The throne was within reach. Your Majesty, this concubine knows that Yuan will definitely not want to see this concubine again. Your Majesty, there's no need to force him. This concubine is just regretful that I lost my mind and vented my anger on him. Yuan is clearly the most pitiful and the most innocent. He doesn't want to see this concubine and doesn't want to forgive this concubine. It's right. As Imperial Concubine Su spoke, her voice became weaker and weaker, as if she couldn't continue speaking. This concubine will personally bring that bastard here. There were many reasons why Lu Qingdi doted on Imperial Concubine Su for so many years, but there was still some affection in it. After all, Imperial Concubine Su was a woman who could attract many men in all aspects. It was just that Imperial Concubine Su stepped on Lu Qingdi's reverse scale, so he hated her. Once she grasped Lu Qingdi's mind, it wouldn't be difficult for her to get back. Lu Qingdi was a person who cherished old relationships. It was just that the Imperial Concubine was too special to him, so it didn't show on others. Imperial Concubine Su pulled Lu Qingdi's sleeve. She could have brushed it away with a light flick, but Lu Qingdi didn't dare to use force. No, Your Majesty, don't go. If this concubine dies, Yuan will still hate me. Did Imperial Concubine Su want to see Li Hongyuan? Of course not. If the adopted son whom she finally realized she didn't know anything about really came, the situation she created would be destroyed. She was sure that Li Hongyuan wouldn't see her, so she put on such a show. Obviously, she wanted to see him very much. Now, she had to bear the pain of not seeing him. She created a more stable image for herself, and at the same time, she discredited that bastard. Okay, I'll do as you say. Don't talk anymore. Imperial Concubine Su closed her eyes, as if she would never wake up. Lu Qingdi was all kinds of anxious. The Imperial physicians were still trying their best to save her, but they couldn't determine what kind of poison it was. They could only use the most conventional methods, which were obviously ineffective. Seeing that the blood was still flowing, Lu Qingdi cursed the quack doctor and kicked him away. He almost ordered people to drag him out and behead him. Li Hongming entered the palace very quickly. He was one step behind Gongzhou, but he arrived at the Jade Essence Palace before Gongzhou. Because he was worried about his mother, he didn't care about anything else and rushed into the palace. After entering the palace, he didn't even get off the horse, which seemed to be understandable. Mother. Li Hongming ran in a hurry, completely disregarding his manners. He seemed to only have Imperial Concubine Su in his heart. He threw himself to Imperial Concubine Su's side, even ignoring Lu Qingdi. Mother, how are you? He reached out his hand carefully, as if he wanted to touch her, but he didn't dare to. He was afraid that the slightest touch would hurt her. Mother, it's your son. Look at me, okay? Mother. The man's tears also rolled down in an instant. It was said that men didn't cry easily, let alone a prince. But at this time, no one would blame him. Lu Qingdi looked at him and felt incomparably bitter. This was the woman he once doted on, the son he was most optimistic about. Lu Qingdi couldn't help but reach out and pat him on the shoulder. Your mother will be fine. Imperial father, Li Hongming's lips trembled, as if he just noticed Lu Qingdi. Your son was rude just now. What time is it now? Why do you still care about manners? Ming. Imperial Concubine Su called out in a low voice. She wanted to open her eyes, but her eyelids were like 1,000 gold. Your Majesty, this concubine seems to have heard Ming-er's voice. Mother, it's your son. I'm coming. Li Hongming grabbed Imperial Concubine Su. Imperial Concubine Su struggled to open her eyes. Before I die, I can see you one last time. Mother, don't talk nonsense. You'll be fine. Imperial Physician, why don't I see the Imperial Physician? Imperial Father, what did the Imperial Physician say? What did he say? Why can't I see anyone? Li Hongming shouted hysterically. Because talking to Lu Qingdi was like shouting at him. Lu Qingdi didn't mind at this time. There's poison on the weapon. Ordinary detoxification methods won't work. The Imperial Physician is investigating what kind of poison it is. It's only possible to prescribe the right medicine. Li Hongming swallowed back the words he wanted to say. He clenched his teeth, and the veins on his forehead bulged. Your Majesty, Jin Qin Wang Fu's physician has arrived. The palace servant outside hurriedly reported. Why haven't you called him in yet? Lu Qingdi and Li Hongming spoke at the same time. Gong Jiu strode in and was about to salute, but Li Hongming grabbed him and pulled him over with all his strength. Quickly save my mother. There were still traces of tears on his face. Gong Jiu subconsciously wanted to shake off Li Hongming. If he really did that, it would be easy to do. In the end, he restrained himself. Gong Jiu took Imperial Concubine Su's pulse, asking Your Majesty to move. This person is about to die. You guys aren't physicians. What's the use of surrounding her? At this time, Lu Qingdi was very obedient. His movements were also very smooth. Gong Jiu impolitely sat in Lu Qingdi's original position and spread out the needle case. There was a row of shining silver needles. His finger slid across it and then he took out one. Just as he was about to start, Gong Jiu suddenly paused. Your Majesty, Imperial Concubine Nyang has lost too much blood. Some of the blood has coagulated. To avoid causing an impact, we may need to touch Imperial Concubine Nyang's body. Men and women shouldn't touch each other. Even if the other party was an old woman, she was still the Emperor's woman. So to prevent Lu Qingdi's possessiveness from causing mischief, it was best to make it clear in advance. In the eyes of a physician, isn't there only the patient and not the difference between men and women? Lu Qingdi was very righteous. He just didn't know if it was because, in any case, she was already so old. Even if she was cured, Zhen wouldn't sleep. So what if she was touched by another man? It's not like he was wearing a green hat. Thank you, Imperial Father. Li Hongming was really afraid that Lu Qingdi would give up on the treatment. Obviously, Lu Qingdi's IQ was also online at this time. In any case, he was the savior of Imperial Concubine Nyang. If he didn't treat Imperial Concubine Nyang because of this, it might be understood from a man's point of view. But from a reasonable point of view, it wouldn't be understood. After getting permission, Gong Jiu no longer hesitated. He tore Imperial Concubine Su's clothes a little. It looked like a bloody mess and her skin couldn't be seen. Then, his left hand felt around the wound and the silver needle in his right hand steadily fell. Looking at the current situation, it was obvious that the first step was to stop the bleeding. Otherwise, Imperial Concubine Su might bleed to death before the detoxification. Gong Jiu's silver needle hemostasis technique could be said to be superb. With just a few needles, he easily did what a group of Imperial doctors couldn't do. Then, Gong Jiu took out the prepared disinfectant alcohol, medical cotton, and tweezers from his medical box. Obviously, these things also came from Jingwan. It wasn't too difficult. Since she said it, Li Hongyuan's subordinates could naturally get it. Gong Jiu casually handed it to Li Hongming. use this to clean Imperial Concubine Sue's wound. Remember not to touch the silver needle. Gong Jiu went to write a few prescriptions and explained it to Luqingdi's people. After that, he didn't ask any more questions. Imperial Concubine Sue's palace maid cleaned her wound, but it was obvious that she had never done such a thing before. Originally, she could hold the embroidery needle as if it was flying, but now, she was clumsy, making people anxious. Moreover, Gong Jiu only stopped Imperial Concubine Sue's bleeding, but he didn't stop the pain. Once the alcohol was applied, the stinging pain caused Imperial Concubine Sue to groan in pain. Her face was so pale that there was no trace of blood. The palace maid's hands trembled even more, afraid that she had hurt her master. Gong Jiu could clearly relieve her pain. During the trauma surgery in the Northwest, he didn't use silver needles to relieve pain. Obviously, it was because the other party didn't get along with her master. He was black-hearted and deliberately did it. He couldn't use other methods, so this was a small matter. What's going on? What is this? Imperial Concubine Mother wasn't like this just now. Li Hongming grabbed Gong Jiu's lapel and questioned him with an unkind expression. Gong Jiu rudely pried Li Hongming's hand away. Third Prince, please calm down. This is to prevent Imperial Concubine Sue's wound from becoming red and swollen. It will only increase the pain. Other than that, there won't be any other effect. This is something that can't be helped. He explained indifferently. The way he addressed Li Hongming was purely out of disgust. Li Hongming's face was dark, but he couldn't say anything. He was reduced to a commoner and didn't have a noble title. Under normal circumstances, calling him a prince was already giving him face. The status of a prince was much more honorable than that of a commoner. It was just that Luqingdi didn't give an edict to remove his name from the imperial family. However, it was obvious that after Li Hongming fell down, he still hadn't learned his lesson. The thing that existed in his bones still hadn't been smoothed out. Otherwise, he should know that he shouldn't easily offend a doctor, especially one who was not under his control but had excellent medical skills. When he needed him, he could quietly kill you. However, there was a trace of doubt in Luqingdi's eyes. Imperial Concubine Sue has never been like this before. Replying to your majesty, Imperial Concubine Sue has been poisoned by a special kind of snake venom. At first, the wound will be numb and she won't feel any pain. Only after a period of time will this numbness disappear. Imperial Concubine Sue has obviously passed that time. This kind of pain is within the range of ordinary people, so your majesty doesn't need to worry. Luqingdi nodded and didn't speak anymore. Gong Jiu looked at her coldly. You'd better hurry up. Imperial Concubine Sue's current situation doesn't allow for any delay. Hearing this, the palace maid was also anxious. However, the more anxious she was, the more flustered she became. The more flustered she was, the more unstable her hands were. She almost spilled the wine. The palace maid was so scared that she knelt on the ground. Your Majesty, please forgive me. Your Highness, please forgive me. Luqingdi and Li Hongming's faces were gloomy. Scram, useless thing. Gong Jiu, it's better if you do it. Yes. He picked up a pair of tweezers, picked up a piece of cotton, dipped it in alcohol, and directly rubbed it on Imperial Concubine Sue's wound. His movements were clean and nimble, but it was obvious that he wasn't gentle at all. He directly stuffed the cotton into the wound. Li Hongming saw that he was so crude and clenched his fists. Unruly commoner, you have big guts. You actually dare to use underhanded methods. His fist swung out. In his view, Gong Jiu was a person of Jin Qin Wang Fu, so he didn't have good intentions. Gong Jiu dodged and expressionlessly looked at Li Hongming. If you don't clean it up properly, the one who will suffer will only be Imperial Concubine Sue. How about Wang Ye do it himself? He wasn't a real commoner, so how could Gong Jiu bow and bend his knees? Not only did he have a master behind him, he was also full of confidence. He didn't fear Li Hongming at all. Lao San, wait quietly for Zhen. Don't cause trouble. After cleaning up, Gong Jiu carefully checked Imperial concubine Su's pulse. Her lungs were indeed injured. It wasn't serious, but it was enough to be fatal. Gong Jiu hadn't reached the stage where he could perform internal surgery. Whether Imperial concubine Su could survive or not would depend on her own good fortune. As for the poison, it was secondary. He knew what kind of poison it was and how to detoxify it. As long as he could detoxify it within the effective time, there was nothing to worry about. As for the truth, Gong Jiu also told Lu Qingdi the truth, so that he wouldn't have to take the blame if Imperial concubine Su died. Chapter 547. Gong Jiu also told Lu Qingdi the truth so that he wouldn't have to take the blame if noble consort Su died. You have the ability to deliberately evade the responsibility, and now you're shirking the responsibility, you really are. Third Prince, Gong Jiu rudely interrupted him, this commoner is only a human, not a god. This commoner only knows a little more than the imperial physicians. If Third Prince still insists that this commoner didn't do his duty, then this commoner will be responsible for detoxifying noble consort Su. As for the rest, Third Prince can find whoever he thinks has the ability. Shameful thing, you really are. I want your life, someone come. This commoner is just a commoner. I am indebted to Jin Qin Wang Yi for thinking highly of me, so I became the physician of Jin Qin Wang Fu. In the end, it's just a lowly life. If Third Prince wants it, just take it. Gong Jiu was not afraid at all. Lu Qingdi only felt a sudden pain in his temples. Someone come, take Shen away for Prince Rui. Without permission, no one is allowed to enter. But this address, he didn't know if it was a habit or if it had a special meaning. Li Hongming stiffly looked at Lu Qingdi. Zhen will not pursue the matter because you are worried about your mother. Lao San, so many things have happened, don't speak so casually until now. Li Hongming's lips trembled, his face dejected as he wiped his face. Fu Wang, this son was anxious and lost his sense of propriety. Just now, I was reckless. Dr. Gong, please don't bicker with me. Please take care of Mu Fei. Li Hongming glanced at noble consort Su who had already fallen into a coma. Perhaps it was useless for him to stand here and might even add to the chaos. After all, some thoughts were simply out of his control. Temporarily avoiding them might be the best policy. But those who were outstanding in certain aspects would always have some little eccentricities. Even Lu Qingdi's tolerance for these people was relatively high. Relatively speaking, Gong Jiu was just a little stubborn. Lu Qingdi naturally couldn't bear to part with such a talent. Perhaps Lu Qingdi wanted to express his trust in Gong Jiu, so he directly handed noble consort Su to him and said that as long as Gong Jiu tried his best, he wouldn't do anything even if noble consort Su died. He would deal with the aftermath himself. At the end of the day, Lu Qingdi was still selfish. Although Imperial concubine Su had saved his life, it was still far from enough compared to him. After Imperial concubine Su was grounded, more than half of the people who used to serve her in the palace were beaten to death. She lost her original lofty status, and it was impossible for the Ministry of Internal Affairs to replace her. Now that Emperor Lu Qingdi left with his people, the Jade Palace became lonely and desolate again. The people who served Imperial concubine Su now were only a few palace maids and eunuchs, who were not alert and capable enough. Gong Jiu watched silently. He was about to stand up again, but no one took the initiative to curry favor. This was good too. Gong Jiu's treatment after that was very casual. To a large extent, it depended on Imperial concubine Su's luck. It didn't matter if she could live. Imperial concubine Su's body had suffered quite a bit of damage and was rapidly deteriorating. This time, she had lost too much blood, and the effects were even more serious. Even if she could barely make it through, she would probably have to accompany the Empress. If she died directly, it might be too easy for her. Of course, Gongjiu wouldn't go all out just because of this. Leaving the Jade Palace, Emperor Luqingdi's worry about Imperial concubine Su weakened a little, and he paid more attention to tonight's matter. There were so many assassins in the palace, and he almost fell for it. How could he not be angry? Leading a large group of people, he angrily rushed to the Imperial Garden. The scene had already been cleaned up, but after knowing how many of his children and grandchildren had suffered, his eyes darkened and he almost spat out a mouthful of blood. However, compared to Heartache, Emperor Luqingdi was more angry. Where is Yu Zhongqing? Where did he die? Fu Wang, Commander Yu was seriously injured in the process of killing the assassins. He was also poisoned. Now, he won't make it. Emperor Luqingdi was startled. For a moment, he didn't know how to react. It was as if he had clearly forgotten everything that Yu Zhongqing had done, felt that he was too incompetent, and wanted to vent all his anger on him. Now that he knew that the other's life was in danger, he was like a deflated ball, remembering his loyal past. Immediately send him to the Jade Palace and let the doctor of Jin Qin Wang Fu take a look. Then Emperor Luqingdi seemed to have thought of something. What about you? Is there anyone injured or poisoned? Go to the Jade Palace together and see if it is the same poison. If it is, then cure it together. If there was a way to cure the poison, but they didn't have time to cure it and died, then it really was. And when Emperor Luqingdi learned that these adult sons of his, except for old Seven's arm, were all unharmed, his mood became a little subtle. What Qin Shu Fei saw, he naturally also saw some. As a father, as a husband, in a critical moment, he didn't protect his wife and children, but instead pushed them out. Those children who died, how many of them died because of their actions? People, to seek benefits and avoid harm, this seemed to be their nature. But to really do so, how selfish and cold was that? If it was him, the father, would they also do the same? When he thought of this possibility, Emperor Luqingdi's face turned completely black. Without saying anything, he scolded them to their faces. They were simply disloyal, unfilial, heartless and unrighteous scum. They didn't take responsibility at the critical moment. What was the use of having them? Each and every one of them was scolded silly, but no one dared to talk back, even if they didn't feel that they were in the wrong. The matter here quickly spread to the Sweet Dew Palace. Now, the people of the Sweet Dew Palace needed to grasp all the things that they could grasp. Jingwan felt that it was quite funny. Emperor Luqingdi and his sons were essentially jackals of the same tribe. He was the emperor and there were people who put his life first. Because there were people who blocked the knife, it was easy to stand and talk. If there was no Su Gui Fei to block the fatal wound for him in time, if there were only palace servants who were scared silly beside him, could he be 100% sure that he wouldn't push people to block the knife? In fact, it was 100% certain that he would. After the event, he might even confidently say that his life was so precious that they were all lowly people who deserved to die for him. On the contrary, it was because they didn't take the initiative to stand up to protect him that they deserved to die. So to put it bluntly, the fault of those princes was not that they pushed people to block the danger that belonged to them, but that they pushed the wrong person. This was the biggest difference brought about by the difference in status. If this kind of thing happened in her previous life, then even if you pushed a beggar, you would be condemned by everyone. The higher the status of the person who pushed people, the more criticism they would receive. But here, if you pushed 100 or 1,000 servants and you were the only one who was fine in the end, the world would take it for granted. Your own life was your own life. The lives of lowly people were like a blade of grass or a stone. Ah Yuan, when are we leaving the palace? No matter when, it was really uncomfortable to stay in the palace. I'm afraid not for the time being. What's wrong, are you feeling uncomfortable? No, I'm just a little sleepy. Jingwan shook her head. Then go sleep in the side hall for a while. Tonight's matter won't be over so easily. You might not be able to sleep for the whole night. Qin Shufei said. Jingwan nodded, thank you, Your Highness. She accepted Qin Shufei's kindness. Li Hongyuan followed her. The two hugged each other and slept in their clothes. Jingwan slept in Li Hongyuan's arms. Her breathing quickly became light and long. Li Hongyuan was originally a little worried that she would be frightened, but now he was relieved. Pulling the thin blanket on his body, Li Hongyuan also closed his eyes and pretended to sleep. His mind was thinking about tonight's matter. According to the current situation, he was slowly unraveling the situation bit by bit. Everything had a purpose. The bigger the matter, the stronger the purpose. According to Qin Shufei, it seemed to be to assassinate Lu Qingdi and the princes. The final result looked very tragic. Lu Qingdi was fine, and the princes were also fine. After killing so many people, it seemed to be purely killing people on sight. Those who ran fast were fine, and those who ran slow deserved it. It shouldn't be like this. Then looking at it from another point of view, whoever lost in this assassination would benefit. The matter was very clear. The only person who benefited was Imperial concubine Su. Although she saw that she had sacrificed herself, and it didn't seem like she was resting, the world didn't lack people who would gamble with their lives. If you want to achieve great things, you have to be more ruthless than others. When necessary, you have to be even more ruthless to yourself. Then the problem returned to the original point. According to Li Hongyuan's understanding, with the current power of the Su family and Li Hongming, they wouldn't be able to carry out tonight's assassination. It wasn't that they didn't have a way to get people into the palace, but that they didn't have such well-trained assassins. Even if they had the Minister of Personnel, Lord Su, whom Li Hongyuan didn't have any impression of in his previous life, secretly helping them, it was unlikely that they could achieve this step. Obviously, there were still things he didn't know. Regarding this, Li Hongyuan wasn't vexed. Although he had the ability of clairvoyance and held an advantage, the things he knew were limited after all. Moreover, due to the long period of time, it was normal for him to be negligent and forget. Thinking about it, Li Hongyuan entered a semi-hazy state until someone knocked on the door outside. Li Hongyuan opened his eyes. Wan, wake up. Now he was worried about leaving Jingwan here alone. What's wrong? Jingwan was still sleepy and in a daze. There should be something outside. I just remembered. After that, we'll go back to the prince's mansion to sleep. Oh. Jingwan obviously hadn't woken up yet and was a little dazed. Li Hongyuan asked someone to fetch warm water for her to wash up a little and wake up. When Sister He and Mammy Gong served Jingwan, Li Hongyuan learned about the situation from eunuch Mu. Lu Qingdi mobilized all the men of the blackguard to replace the imperial guards, besieged the imperial kitchen and the musical house, and arrested and detained all the people inside. The imperial guards were also guarded. Then, a large-scale search was carried out, and those who were close to the assassins were basically unlucky. Later, during the search, they found many corpses. Only then did they realize that they were people who had been replaced by assassins. When they turned back to look at those assassins, it turned out that they were all in disguise. Their technique was actually not very good. As long as they got along with people for a long time, their acquaintances would be able to tell that something was wrong. Therefore, these people took advantage of the time and took advantage of the fact that people in several places were busy tonight to take advantage of the time. Where these people came from and how did they enter the palace? There was no way to find out. There were no suspicious places found at all the gates of the palace. Of course, if they said that they didn't find anything, they were shirking the responsibility. It was not the first time that something happened in the palace. The emperor's birthday the year before last was also left unsettled. Lu Qingdi didn't believe it. He gave Li Suyen a strict order to investigate to the end. If there was anything suspicious, they were all taken back to the prison of the blackguard for interrogation. In this way, when Lu Qingdi arrived at the Suite du Palace, it was almost 4 hours later. As an emperor, he was suspicious by nature. Although he didn't suspect Li Hongyuan, Lu Qingdi still asked a few questions instinctively. Li Hongyuan's face was cold. He was very cooperative, but his expression was too sarcastic. The fact that Lu Qingdi could still stand properly was a testament to his tolerance. But now, he was being mocked by his son. No matter how high his tolerance was, he couldn't help but fly into a rage. Li Hongyuan didn't budge at all. In the end, Qin Shufei and Jing Wan had to work together to stop the war between the father and son. In the end. Get out of here. Lu Qingdi pointed outside. Li Hongyuan couldn't ask for more. He took Jing Wan and quickly left. Seeing him so straightforward, Lu Qingdi's anger rose sharply. Previously, I said so much, but he didn't listen. Now, he seems very obedient. He was waiting for me here, right? Ah. This evil creature. Your Majesty, please calm down. Qin Shufei gently stroked his chest to help him calm down. It's not like Your Majesty doesn't know that His Highness has such a temper since he was young. He can't bear any grievances. Tonight, it was just a coincidence that the couple left the banquet. Your Majesty didn't suspect anything. But now that you asked, he's definitely unhappy. Moreover, His Highness seems to be angry with Your Majesty. This concubine doesn't know why, but with these two things added together, he's going all out against you. His Highness is a straightforward person. Everything is on the surface, but there's no twists and turns in his heart. After being comforted by Qin Shufei's soft words, Lu Qingdi's anger dissipated a lot. Thinking about his evil creature's son, since he was young, when was he as obedient as his other sons? He was already used to it. If he suddenly became very obedient, he would be worried. So, in the end, he could only sigh helplessly. Qin Shufei didn't ask anything. She just waited on Lu Qingdi to sleep with the palace servants. After Lu Qingdi fell asleep, Qin Shufei dismissed the palace servants. She sat quietly on the edge of the bed and looked at Lu Qingdi. The other party was frowning. Obviously, he didn't sleep well. Qin Shufei's expression didn't change, but her eyes didn't have the previous warmth. She was still a peaceful and beautiful person, but with a bit of coldness. Qin Shufei sat for a while. She stood up and walked to the window. She looked up at the full moon in the sky. It should have been a family reunion and a day of celebration, but such a tragedy happened. She didn't know how many people died and how many were injured. She didn't even dare to ask. It should be the happiest time in an ordinary family. But in the imperial palace, the more it was like this, the more likely it was to cause all kinds of trouble. If it was light, there would be hidden mockery. If it was serious, there would be all kinds of framing. Moreover, because of this, the people with the most noble status were gathered together. So, Qin Shufei actually disliked all kinds of festivities. The more beautiful it was, the more tragic it would be after something happened. Because of his relationship with Gongzhou, Li Hongyuan knew more than Lu Qingdi. Although Gongzhou was still in the Jade Essence Palace, he always had a way to bring the news out. For example, after the detoxification, Yu Zhongqing didn't even frown when the wound extended from his shoulder blade to the back of his waist. Li Hongyuan looked at the 2-finger-wide note. The snake venom came from a special kind of poisonous snake in the territory of the former Wei. The former Wei. Li Hongyuan murmured these two words. This gave him a good direction. For Li Hongyuan, this was a good clue. However, when Luqingdi knew about this, Wei Xianfei would be in trouble. Even if she knew that this matter was unlikely to be her doing, Wei Xianfei was trapped in Qiyuan Imperial Palace, and the only people she could trust were the maids who had served her before. She was absolutely isolated from the outside world. However, who asked her to be the princess of the former Wei? Now that there was an assassination at the Mid-Autumn Festival, there were clues pointing to the former Wei. Therefore, when Wei Xianfei was bored and was dressing up in front of the mirror, Luqingdi angrily rushed in, grabbed Wei Xianfei, and slapped her. Wei Xianfei turned over and hit the dressing table. Coincidentally, the tip of a hairpin was pointed at her flesh, while the other side was against the makeup box. The tip of the hairpin pierced directly into her flesh. Wei Xianfei's originally delicate skin and tender flesh was so painful that her face almost twisted. However, after being in the imperial palace of Qiyuan for almost 2 years, Wei Xianfei's pride was almost worn out. Therefore, even if she was angry, she didn't dare to show it. Your Majesty, what did I do wrong? Why are you so angry? She was very pitiful. The poison on the weapon of the assassin last night came from the former Wei. What do you want to say? Luqingdi grabbed her neck and asked gloomily. Wei Xianfei was alarmed. Your Majesty, this concubine doesn't know. I really don't know. Ever since I entered Qiyuan Imperial Palace and became your Majesty's concubine, everything about this concubine is under your Majesty's eyes. How could I do anything? Moreover, since this concubine is your Majesty's concubine, then even if Qiyuan and the former Wei had a war, this concubine would definitely stand on Qiyuan's side. Your Majesty, you have to believe this concubine, Your Majesty. Luqingdi's face was still gloomy and cold. At this moment, the little prince in the cradle suddenly cried. Luqingdi was startled, and his hand unconsciously loosened a little. Wei Xianfei's eyes flashed, and she saw the hope of escaping this disaster. Emperor, for the sake of our child, can you believe this concubine? This matter really has nothing to do with me. I'm your woman when I'm alive and my soul belongs to the Qiyuan when I die. I will never be disloyal. Luqingdi glanced at the cradle. It was his youngest son. His heart was moved and he threw Wei Xianfei away. This matter had better have nothing to do with you. Otherwise, when I find out, I'll skin you alive. Humph, Wei Xianfei fell to the ground and didn't get up for a long time. At that time, she refused to go to the Xiongnu for peace and stayed in the Qiyuan. She thought that at least there was a life of luxury here. Look, this was her life of luxury. She was clearly the legitimate princess of the Wei dynasty. She grew up being pampered. If she stayed in the Wei dynasty and got a husband, she would still be surrounded by attendants. The palace servant stood at the door with a cold expression, as if he didn't see Wei Xianfei's embarrassment. This was the current situation of the Yi Palace. It was also the coldest and most ruthless reality. There was no support, no favor, and anyone could step on her head. Wei Xianfei had been angry before, but she was only ridiculed in return. The appearance of an assassin at the Mid-Autumn Festival was a big matter. It wouldn't be hidden, and it couldn't be hidden. Those who were well informed got the news last night. Today, almost everyone knew. The first reaction of the officials was to wonder who was so audacious. Some people might whisper that imperial concubine Su was lucky. She happened to come across the merit of saving the emperor and was able to turn the situation around. More people thought that it was a conspiracy theory. The simplest way of thinking was that whoever benefited was the mastermind. However, this kind of thing couldn't be said easily. There was no evidence, and it might anger the emperor. Therefore, the key now was to find out the truth of this matter. It was best for those who had nothing to do with it to be a bystander and not to interfere. Of course, this was only on the surface. There were a lot of things to do in the dark. The most basic point was to use all the channels that one could get information to understand the matter in detail as much as possible. This was to prevent other things from happening. When they were caught off guard, if something fell on their head, it would be even more unjust. Following a master like Qin Wang, there were many more benefits. Chapter 548. As for what happened at the Mid-Autumn Festival Palace banquet, only a small number of people were affected. The others continued to live their lives as usual. It was just one more topic to talk about. After all, it involved the royal family and more than one member of the royal family had died. When discussing this matter, it was relatively obscure. With just a few words, it didn't stir up as much waves as most of the gossip. Of course, it looked calm on the surface, but if this matter was related to some official, then there would be a bloody storm after the investigation. At that time, the panic would spread over the capital for at least 3 months. Not many people would be able to ignore the matter as if it had nothing to do with them like it did now. Well, the premise was that it could be investigated. What if it couldn't be investigated? The matter was done so meticulously. Whether the assassin completed the task or not, he would die. Therefore, it was more likely that it couldn't be investigated. However, there were no absolutes in the world. There might be a twist at any time. In the palace, imperial concubine Su was tenacious. Gong Jiu only treated her according to the usual methods and didn't do his best. She survived. Perhaps there was too much hatred and unwillingness in her heart. Her desire to live was too strong. On the night of the Mid-Autumn Festival, the former Princess Rui, Lady Lu, also followed into the palace. She brought her 3 daughters with her. Princess Haong found her grandson. Although all the trouble was caused by the father of the baby girl in her hands, the child was innocent. Princess Haong wasn't a psychopath. She returned the child safe and sound. Now, Lady Lu kept a close watch on the 3 children. At home, no matter how angry Li Hongming was at her, she was indifferent. To put it bluntly, she was a typical case of a dead pig not afraid of boiling water. However, if Li Hongming tried to touch her children, just wanted to get close to them, Lady Lu would go crazy in seconds. She would fight with Li Hongming like a mad dog. Having seen this more than once, Li Hongming's face was so dark that ink could drip out. However, he had no power and influence. Lady Lu's father was still an elder of the inner pavilion. He still wanted to rise up and he still wanted the Lu family's help. Therefore, he couldn't do anything to Lady Lu. However, Li Hongming had never been a magnanimous person. If he really ascended the throne, Lady Lu would definitely not have a good end. Lady Lu took care of noble consort Su. If it was in the past, she would probably do it herself. But now, she just sat there like a wooden stake. She didn't even move her mouth, let alone move her hands. Not to mention that the Jade Essence Palace was fully staffed now and the rewards from Emperor Luqing were flowing like water. Even if it was just a miserable situation before, Lady Lu wouldn't help. It was almost time, so she went to see the children. Although noble consort Su was injured and not sick, and Lady Lu rarely let the children appear in front of noble consort Su, when the children were around, Lady Lu was obviously much gentler and angry. Noble consort Su was so angry that her heart, liver, and lungs hurt. However, being angry could only increase the burden on her body. She could only suppress her anger. She used to be satisfied with Lady Lu, but now she was as dissatisfied with Lady Lu as she was with Jingwan. However, Lady Lu was stubborn now. Similarly, if anyone dared to use her children, she would still dare to make a scene in the palace. Therefore, in the end, noble consort Su could only be like Li Hongming. Lady Lu saw this and sneered in her heart. In the past, she was too stupid and had too many misgivings. That was why she was tightly controlled in the palm of their hands. Now, even if she knew that she might be at the end of the road, she didn't care. First, she would let herself be happy. When the time came, she would just take the 3 children with her. In any case, if she died, the 3 children definitely wouldn't have a good life. Although she was reluctant, she had no other choice because Lady Lu was very clear that even if she lowered herself like before, she wouldn't have a good life in the future. Besides, Lady Lu felt that she might not be at the end of the road. As long as Li Hongming couldn't sit on the throne, the 4 of them still had a good chance of survival. The new emperor would deal with Li Hongming and wouldn't touch them. Firstly, it would show the new emperor's benevolence. Secondly, her 3 children were all girls and wouldn't pose a threat to the new emperor. On the surface, Lady Lu tried her best to set up a protective wall for the children, but in her heart, she kept thinking about how to find a way out for them. It would be great if she could gain the favor of the new emperor first and get a protective talisman for them. That's right. Now, as long as she could exchange the safety of the 4 of them, Lady Lu wouldn't hesitate to betray Li Hongming. Unfortunately, she counted her fingers and thought over and over again, but she didn't think that any of them had a high chance of becoming the emperor. The emperor clearly had so many sons, and it seemed that they all had some ability, but they weren't outstanding. She used to think highly of Li Hongming, but he failed miserably time and time again. He was the first to fall. It was obvious that he was useless. It was this kind of situation that was the most difficult to bet on. However, this kind of thing was different from other things. She couldn't cast the net too widely. Otherwise, if she was careless, she could lose her life in advance. If Li Hongming found out, he could kill her directly without caring about anything else. Princess Lu looked more and more like a lifeless wooden stake, but she was very anxious in her heart. Li Hongming had been restored to the title of prince, but he hadn't arranged any work for the time being. Lady Lu had also been restored to the status of princess. Prince Rui's mansion had also been restored to its original size, and the necessary things had been moved in. However, Princess Lu accidentally found one thing. Now Prince Rui's attitude towards concubine Su seemed to be a bit strange. He was concerned about her, but there seemed to be something else. Princess Lu quietly observed and thought carefully. Finally, she understood the key of the problem. Our Prince Rui still resented his biological mother. He resented her for not dying directly. Thinking about it, if concubine Su died directly, then all the credit of saving the emperor would be compensated for Li Hongming. If she died directly, Lu Qingdi's feelings for her would be even deeper. Every time concubine Su was mentioned intentionally or unintentionally, Lu Qingdi would think that concubine Su exchanged her life for his. Whether it was out of guilt or out of kindness, Li Hongming would inevitably benefit, just like Li Hongyuan. If she died, Li Hongming could immediately return to the imperial court, instead of taking care of the sick in the Jade Essence Palace. When a prince's mother died, he didn't have to worry about his mother. He was in a hurry now. If concubine Su was in her previous state, she would be of great help to Li Hongming. Li Hongming wouldn't be like this. The problem was that concubine Su's current state could be seen by anyone with discerning eyes. After she recovered, she would be equal to a disabled person. Therefore, it was not as valuable as dying directly. Princess Lu sneered in her heart. No matter how Li Hongming behaved on the surface, he was cold-blooded and selfish in nature. He put his own interests first. She wondered what concubine Su would think if she knew it. Would she be sad and disappointed, or would she be gratified and kill herself to help him? After all, this son was taught by her hand. Unfortunately, concubine Su was asleep when Li Hongming showed this trace on his face. Otherwise, with her keen senses, how could she not notice her son's abnormality? Princess Lu wanted to watch a show. She hoped that a good mother-in-law would find out or a man would say it directly. At that time, it would definitely be a good show. However, the chance to see it live was not big. Li Hongming and concubine Su were not stupid. It was impossible for them to expose this in front of a third person. The court was not calm. The adult princes were fighting openly and secretly. This time, their attitude was surprisingly consistent. They tried to pin the mastermind on Li Hongyuan. Li Hongyuan was still the same as before, but his incomparable position in Luqingdi's heart was the biggest threat. This kind of inference without evidence was naturally untenable. What was more, Li Hongyuan had already expressed his attitude in front of Luqingdi. Li Hongyuan made it clear to Luqingdi that he didn't care if Luqingdi suspected him or stripped him of his title. He didn't have time to explain or pay attention to anyone. However, Luqingdi fell for this trick. It was said that once a person's heart was biased, he would see everything with a filter. Li Hongyuan grew up as a scoundrel. In Luqingdi's eyes, he was a straightforward and well-behaved child. Once the first impression was the strongest, Luqingdi would definitely be unhappy when other princes slandered Li Hongyuan. Not to mention, on the night of the Mid-Autumn Festival, Luqingdi was quite disappointed with their performance. So, they didn't dare to pretend to be pitiful by losing a child to gain sympathy. If they really dared to do so, Li Hongyuan wouldn't do anything to them, but they would suffer. In the end, those who still wanted to put the blame on Li Hongyuan were stopped by Luqingdi's unfilial and unfilial. They didn't dare to say more. Originally, many people were worried about Li Hongyuan. However, he didn't do anything, and Luqingdi had full power to uphold justice for him. Well, they were worried for nothing. The power of bias was really extraordinary. As for those who didn't like Li Hongyuan, they could only stomp their feet in anger once again. Jin Qinhuang's position in the emperor's heart is unshakable. Even if it is shaken, those who want to kill him will be consigned to eternal damnation even faster. Rather than saying that the emperor is biased towards Jin Qinhuang, it's better to say that the emperor is protecting the other princes to a certain extent. Now, it's just that the emperor is still holding up, and Jin Qinhuang is too lazy to move. If the estimation is correct, Jin Qinhuang's wings are full, his claws and teeth are sharp, and he can brazenly attack at any time. For some things, as long as you pull out a thread, you can pull out a longer thread. Although it was just the tip of the iceberg, it was enough to frighten people. To deal with a person like Jin Qinhuang, one couldn't act blindly without thinking. If one moved, one must hit with one blow. Otherwise, one could be gnawed until not even bones were left. Therefore, one must be patient, cautious, and thorough. Sun Yilin spent the Mid-Autumn Festival with the Luo family in the Luo family. It could be considered as experiencing the happy atmosphere of family harmony. However, that kind of happy mood couldn't be maintained for too long. Because, after all, the Luo family wasn't his home. Tidying up the few things he had, he prepared to leave the capital. Just at this time, someone came to the Luo family's door. Moreover, it was a girl, and she specifically asked to see Sun Yilin. Sun Yilin was originally playing chess with Luo Jingbua, and Sun Yijia was watching from the side. Hearing the news from the door guard, Sun Yijia looked at her elder brother with astonishment and ridicule. Her fifth brother owed a romantic debt outside. This was really too rare. Sun Yilin's brows wrinkled. Sun Yijia looked, afraid that it wasn't something pleasant. She originally wanted to open her mouth and tease him a bit, but now, fifth brother, why don't I have someone send her away? A girl who wasn't related to him came to look for a man. It was very easy for them to never see such a person again, let alone send her away. Sun Yilin looked at Sun Yijia with a little astonishment and disapproval. Little sister, she's just a girl. It was easy to send her away, but even easier to destroy her. How could you be so cruel? Sun Yijia was speechless. Didn't I do it for you? I thought that someone was pestering you. It turns out that my good intentions were treated as ill intent. Her brother's temperament looked gentle, but he was actually very cold, especially towards insignificant people. Now that he had changed so much, he was no longer gentle even on the surface. Could it be that he was gentle in his bones now? Sun Yilin rubbed between his eyebrows helplessly. These days, the siblings had spent more time together, and Sun Yilin's emotions had finally eased. He was no longer as stiff and emotionless as before. However, this was the first time that his emotions were so obvious. Sun Yijia was really curious now. Bring her in. The other party had never been to the capital before and was unfamiliar with this place. They couldn't just ignore her. She was quickly brought in. When they were still a distance away, Sun Yijia could feel her joy from her gait. However, when she got closer and saw her brother's expressionless face, she immediately became cautious and nervous, as if she was afraid that she would upset her brother. This girl wasn't very beautiful. Her face was a little round, but she looked quite likable. She had a good upbringing. Sun Yijia guessed that she might be from a big family. Her eyes were very clean. It could be seen that either she was open-minded and didn't like to be calculative, or her living environment was relatively simple. If she was really from a big family, she would belong to the former. Also, her eyes obviously showed that she liked her brother very much. It was very pure, and she didn't seem to be affected by her brother's current appearance. Sun Yijia's heart skipped a beat. Yilin, Min Xiaoyuan, Sun Yilin interrupted her, you only brought a servant girl and a nanny. How dare you come all the way to the capital? Do you know what you are doing? You are a girl. What if you are in danger? His tone was unspeakably strict. Naturally, there was also concern that he didn't notice. Sun Yijia saw this and some thoughts in her heart became more and more obvious. Min Xiaoyuan lowered her head and unconsciously tugged at her handkerchief. Then, she lifted her eyes and carefully looked at Sun Yilin. I also brought my brother's attendant and a coachman. She said softly. Sun Yilin choked. Obviously, his heart was blocked. His eyes turned and it looked like he was about to roll his eyes. Sun Yijia snorted and laughed out loud. She hurriedly covered her mouth with her handkerchief and then acted as if nothing had happened. She didn't do anything. Please ignore her. You can continue. Luo Jingbo was also drinking tea at this time. The husband and wife had a tacit understanding. Their eyes met through the edge of the quilt and they smiled tacitly. But, surnamed Min. Was she a girl from the Min family? Sun Yilin glanced at them and didn't say anything. Is this the main point? Min Xiaoyuan also looked at Sun Yilin and Luo Jingbo. If she guessed correctly, they should be Sun Yilin's younger sister and brother-in-law. She had already asked around about Sun Yilin. But if he didn't introduce her, she couldn't just run up to them. Moreover, her main point now was to make Sun Yilin let her stay. Then what's the main point? Didn't you say that I didn't bring enough people? Min Xiaoyuan revealed a sense of naivety and doubt. Sun Yilin was a little discouraged. Obviously, this wasn't the first time this happened. You shouldn't have come to the capital. When Min Xiaoyuan heard this, the rims of her eyes became a little red. Her hand that was tugging at her handkerchief was a little pale. Sun Yilin reflected on himself if he was too straightforward. However, there were some things that he couldn't do and couldn't promise, so he shouldn't drag it out. However, this girl seemed to have a one-track mind. It wasn't the first time he had rejected her so straightforwardly, but he didn't see any signs of her backing down. Miss Min, chasing after a man without telling your family is not something a lady from a respectable family should do. Not only will your family be worried, but if others find out, not only you, but your parents and elders will also be pointed at. Your sister's reputation will also be tarnished because of your actions. Whether you're selfish or willful, you shouldn't. Young master's son. The old servant behind Min Xiaoyuan finally couldn't listen to it anymore. Sun Yilan glanced at her coldly and continued to speak, ignoring Min Xiaoyuan's pitter-patter of tears. I've told you long ago that it's impossible between us. Not to mention that I'm all alone now with no official position, title, or property. How can I afford to raise a pampered girl like you? Even I have never thought of marrying. So, go back to where you came from. Don't cause trouble for others, do you understand? This was the first time Sun Yijia heard her elder brother speak so bluntly. It was too much to say this to a girl. Moreover, this girl didn't seem to be thick-skinned. The fact that she followed him to the capital was probably the most outrageous thing she could do. Even if she wanted to reject him, she should at least be more tactful. Fifth brother, little sister, this is my business. Don't butt in. Just mind your own business. Sun Yilan tilted his head and said coldly. Sun Yijia was obviously angered by him this time. She put down the cup in her hand on the table. Fine, I don't care. Do whatever you want. This time, Luo Jingbei had a headache. Pregnant women had a strange temper. It was fine if his wife wasn't angry, but once she got angry, he might not be able to coax her back even if he tried his best. Brother-in-law, you shouldn't trick me like this. Min Xiaoyuan wiped her tears. I've disturbed you today, young master. I'll leave now. As she spoke, she left directly. She was very straightforward, but her whole person exuded a sense of stubbornness. Young miss. Min Xiaoyuan's servant called out worriedly. Let's go. Why are you staying here? You'll be annoying. Min Xiaoyuan quickened her steps. Min Xiaoyuan's behavior was surprising. She chased after him from so far away, but she gave up so easily. Only Sun Yilan felt his head hurt even more. Little sister, send someone to find out where they're staying. They're new to the capital and will be easily bullied. Fifth brother, didn't you tell me to stay out of your business? Why are you looking for me? Sun Yijia said coldly. Little sister. Sun Yilan said helplessly, this girl was born in the Min family. Her grandfather and the head of the Min family are cousins. Their family is doing well. She's the daughter of the main wife, so she should have a good marriage of equal status. She shouldn't be involved with me. I don't know my future, and I don't want to get married. Don't you understand? Fifth brother, when did you meet her? 2 years ago. Although Sun Yilan didn't know why, he still answered truthfully. Do you know how old she is now? Sun Yilan's face stiffened. 18. Sun Yijia sneered. Obviously, you've already delayed her. We're all from aristocratic families. You know very well what aristocratic families are like. When you met her, she was already 16. What do you think the chances of her not being engaged are? The fact that she's still with you now means that her marriage is obviously over. Not many men in aristocratic families can decide their own marriages, let alone a girl. It takes a lot of courage and determination to fight against her own marriage. If she doesn't do well, her family would rather kill her. The fact that she's still standing in front of you, other than the fact that her parents should be kind and doting on her, she's definitely sacrificed a lot herself. However, she's still full of vitality, which means that she has no regrets about her sacrifice. She may be rebellious, but she dares to pursue her goals. Even if you reject her, at least you shouldn't use words to hurt her. Everyone can criticize her, but you can't. Furthermore, if a pampered girl were to meet a man who had lost her heart outside, how could her family turn a blind eye to that man? But why do I feel that you haven't interacted with her family? This means that Miss Min stopped her family from looking for you to avoid causing trouble for you. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.